Welcome back to the Gap Podcast. My name is Guillermo with my co-hosts Peter and Abraham. Today, we are talking about the psychology of attraction. All right, Peter, take it away. What have you found for us?
All right, well, today I'll be talking about Psychology Today as well as a few other websites. And never mind, just a website. And we'll be talking about the 5 main points that we constantly reference is mutual eye contact. In other words, if the person constantly tries leveling their eyes to you, keeping constant focus towards you, it's a very good sign that they're attracted towards you. Another one is the light touch. In other words, if the person constantly touches, just not constantly, but at least a nice little a slide on the arm, anything that shows that they want to have physical contact with you, then once again, it's a good sign they're attracted to you. If you see the person pull away from you quickly, it's a good sign they're not attracted to you. Basic things like that. Next one is inward leaning. In other words, they don't like putting distance between you and the other person. Next two are mirroring, which means they constantly imitate your moves. It's not going to be like a exact mirror where they raise your right arm, they raise their right arm, but just more or less their body language would be exactly as the way you have yours.
Can I jump into that?
Go ahead.
So mirroring is actually based by science, in neuroscience actually. So in the brain, we have something called motor mirror neurons. And the motor mirror neurons, whenever we see something that we kind of empathize with or relate to, these motor mirror neurons, they fire and they subconsciously cause our behavior to kind of copy what they're doing, but we don't know it. And it's very subtle. A lot of people don't catch it. But when it does happen and you notice it, that's a good sign that they're empathizing with you at the very least and that they don't feel threatened by you. All right, Peter, what else you got?
Last one is barriers. In other words, if they don't put a lot of barriers between you and the other person doesn't put a lot of barriers between you two, it's because then they like you. In other words, if they constantly try to distance themselves, once again, it's the same thing as distancing. In other words, the inward leaning. This time includes a lot of physical options. Moving on to the website Hackspirit.
If I can just add on to the barriers too. So I remember reading a book called from Joe Navarro. I think he wrote the Dictionary of Body Language. And in the book, he mentioned that these barriers, they can be very subtle. So when you're talking to somebody, for instance, at a date, and you're sitting across them at a booth, if you subconsciously move something like maybe a flower stand or like a little menu, like a small little stand menu, it could mean that you don't feel entirely comfortable with the situation. And you're doing that to put subconscious distance between you and the other person. However, if you subconsciously move those things out of the way, it shows that you're very drawn to what they're saying and you're curious to hear more. So something to consider.
I will use all of this information for evil. I'm letting you know that right now.
Psychology is a science. What you do with the information is up to you.
You're just going to turn into Kevin Spacey from House of Cards.
Oh, no.
No. Remember, we must stick to the science.
Regardless, the Hackspirit provides once again, reinforces the idea between the 5 points mentioned earlier, but they also move on to a bunch of different other points. In other words, Memo, you help me refute that or support that.
Sounds good.
And I'll try to mention a few of them.
Gotcha.
Now, one of them is constantly laughing at everything you say. In other words, if you may constantly make jokes and they constantly laugh at them, and you see it's not more of a courtesy laugh, they actually genuinely just laugh at whatever you're doing, or they constantly try to have a positive attitude around you. It's a good sign that they are attracted towards you.
So I'll just jump in there. So into you might be a bit of a stretch. It's not always universal. It could just mean that the person is trying to get in good with you for whatever reason. They could want to be your friend. They could just be trying to be friendly. They don't want to upset you. Or they may actually be romantically interested in you. Or they're trying to manipulate you. There's lots of different variables that may come into play, though. It's something you have to consider. Yeah, so if you really think about it, whenever a person laughs at what you're saying, you feel good about yourself. You let your guard down. You're more likely to reveal information about yourself that's more private. So although it's probably not the case every single time a person laughs or tries to manipulate you, it's something to keep in mind if they're trying to get in. For instance, if they're trying to con you, that's very important to realize. Because if they are doing it just to get on your good side, watch out. Abraham, is something you want to say?
Oh, I wanted to say it's psychological warfare.
Exactly.
Just land mines everywhere. Why even bother talking to a human? That is all.
That's the thing about the human condition. What were we gonna say?
So it's kind of like how the waiters constantly laugh at every joke you make, just so you can get a better tip.
That's exactly it. It's not, the manipulation there isn't evil. It's just they're trying to make more money, right?
So
So I
do you
understand.
ever just tell really, really shitty jokes and just see like how
Just to
far
see
they're
their
willing to
laugh.
push it? Yeah. Just be like,
I personally know because I want to avoid the awkward situation, but other people I know have. So that's different. All right, Peter, what else you got?
next one is once again, same thing with the barriers is the fact that they are constantly trying to stand next to you, especially when they try to push someone or try to move someone quickly so they can just get next to you. Is another sign that they're attracted.
Yeah, so this one kind of boils down to sex. So when men are courting, they tend to want to get more physical, whereas women, they're more nonverbal. So whenever a woman flirts, it tends to be more of a word game thing, whereas a man, it's more of a physical game, right? However, there are differences. Sometimes some men are more wordy and some women are more physical. It just depends on the flirting style. But yes, more generally, if a person wants to get closer to you, that means that they are comfortable with you and they're willing to stay next to you.
I need an adult.
I need an adult.
you need somebody to chaperone.
Yeah. No scope.
Somebody help me. No, I just wanted to say,
Uh-huh.
when a handshake becomes a hand-holding session, and then a hug becomes a hug from behind, and you get really close, that's happened.
Mhm.
That's
That's just
happened.
rape. That's just
No, it's
from
not.
behind.
No,
I
it's
didn't
not.
do that. They
They do
like,
it to it. It tends to be a woman male thing, right? The women do it to the male, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's the same experience with me. I don't
Real
know
quick,
the
real
size.
quick.
Yeah.
Just like how, just like how a mantis woman will fucking eat another mantis. It's male mantis. It's the same thing.
Most female.
Just a
I don't.
little less extreme.
Well, not all women are gonna bite your head off. So this is something I have to keep in mind. But yes, I was gonna say I don't know scientifically, but from my personal experience, if the woman is the more confident one in the situation, she'll do the whole physical thing first. All right, Peter, what else you got?
Next thing is once again when it comes to body language, but this is something they cannot control. In other words, is when they blush. If you enter a room and you see your crush is blushing or trying to look away from you to hide that fact from you, it's a good sign they're attracted to you.
That is true. So blushing is an autonomic response mediated by something called the limbic system. The limbic system regulates emotions, but it also regulates heart rate and vasodilation. Vasodilation is a blood flow in your body, in your veins. So whenever you're blushing, your vessels are dilating, which is why you see more blood to the face, and it's controlled by the automatic emotional response. And when they're trying to hide it from you, that's something called perception management. That means that they don't want you to know that they're hiding it for whatever reason, which is probably that they like you or something happened and they want to hide it, or whatever the case may be.
You know what's funny? Nowadays you can't tell because everyone's wearing a mask.
Oh crap!
In case this is in the future, we're right now in the middle of the COVID pandemic. We're filming this April 24th, so we're pretty deep into it. But okay, what else you got?
I mean, also the biggest other mask nowadays in the pandemic is the fact that when they text you, it's mostly just because they're bored rather than actually being.
Oh,
interested.
that's true. That's something you have to keep in mind.
The next thing refers back to body language. It said if the person is attracted to you, then they tend to stand taller, they pull their shoulders back and suck in their stomachs. Now, in order to just fix their posture, in other words, just to present themselves in the best way possible to, talk to you.
Well, I don't know entirely about posture, but I do know about voice. So when males are interested in a woman that they like, studies have shown that their voice drops a bit. On the opposite, when women are interested in a male they like, their voice escalates. It goes up a bit. However, there are exceptions, of course. Some women, their voice gets lower, and some men, their voice gets higher, right? It really just depends on the person. But a majority of the people, the trend follows. If you're a guy and you like a woman, your voice will get lower. If you're a woman, you like a guy,
hot stuff?
you see, it's exactly like that. I think it's kind of an evolutionary thing. If you have a lower voice, it means you have more testosterone, which means that you're stronger and you can have better kids. If you have a higher voice, it means you have more estrogen, which means you can have better kids. I think it boils down to that.
All right, sounds. The voice thing is actually kind of interesting. I do find that fascinating. The issue is, it's very difficult to actually differentiate between pitches. I really doubt it's going to be something. Is it very extreme or is it very subtle?
No, it's very, very subtle. They have to analyze the audio and you can barely pick it up. But if you're a person who has been communicating and you're very adept at this and you hear it, eventually you may be trained to be able to detect the slight pitch change and you can adjust accordingly.
The next thing is social circles. In other words, if their group of friends constantly try to surround you or try to be friends with you, invite you to different places, it's a good indicator that they like you.
When we're talking about
Oh,
the friendship circles, that that doesn't necessarily mean that if they like you, that the person's gonna like you. It could mean that you're getting in good with their friends, and the friends might talk well about you to the person, which may cause them to like you. But that's kind of a variable thing among friends. There is a study that I read which found that middle schoolers, particularly sixth graders, they will get their friends that they know like each other, and they will force them to sit next to each other, and they will force them to communicate, right? But then as they get older, once they're eighth graders, they're more subtle. Instead, they'll just give each other information about the friend that they like and things like that, so that way they can get them together.
So they'll meet on a park bench and then slide an envelope over to them. Here's what I know.
Yes, like deep throat, follow the money, like that. What else you got, Peter?
the next one is along.
She loves
a lot of
K-pop.
these.
Middle schoolers. Anyway, what you saying, Peter?
Oh man, the next one is a lot of these points right here are very general. One of the most general points being stated here is this one. They say all the right things. In other words, if you pay close attention and if they're close and paying attention to you, and reading the menu can sound very sexy, and that is their words, not mine. So
Sloppy Joe.
Yeah, I think that's a load of shit. Let me tell you why. I don't have a PhD in psychology, but from what I understand, saying the right things is a subjective thing. And also dependent on personality. They could be very shy people, naturally, right? And they may sound awkward. Maybe you like that. That doesn't mean that they're saying the wrong things either, right? Or, what is the right thing anyway? Why is reading a menu sexy? Isn't that a little bit suspicious? Oh, I'm going to order the deep fried steak. You just want to be careful. You want to be careful too. What else you got, Peter?
the next one is trying to fix themselves is that they constantly preen themselves. In other words, they fix their hair, they get the two licked up pinkies and swipe their eyebrows. They constantly do that crap around you. And not around you, but, just present themselves towards you. They want to show their best selves.
So preening is something that's categorized in body language behavior. It's very subtle things. Like they may just quickly brush their eyebrows to make sure that they're straight. They may check their face quickly in the mirror, just to make sure that there's no blemishes or something, or to make sure that they look good. But it's usually very subtle. It's not usually like a whole makeover, unless they're getting ready to go out. But that's different.
All right, in that case, actually referring back to that,
Uh-huh.
would you say that the more effort they put into presenting themselves on a date refers to the amount of interest they have in you? Now, this is only referring to the first stages of a relationship. Because after a couple stages, it could just be a comfort thing. In other words, if they're more comfortable with you, then of course they're not going to constantly dress up in the way they did the first date. But on the first date, if they come at you with sweats, does that mean that they're not interested, or it's just how they
Context
are?
It means they see you as a Tinder date.
Context matters too, though. If they're coming in sweats and you're gonna go, I don't know, work out together or something, that's one thing. But if that's what
you don't do a gym first date. Who the hell does
there
that?
are some gym. Oh, I know a girl. But anyway,
No time for a crossover yet.
We're staying out of the conversation. I'm editing that out.
That's another. That's another universe.
I'm editing that out. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes. Anyway, so yes, context does matter. And what do we define more effort? Because some girls, they just don't wear makeup, right? Does that mean that they're not putting in effort? No, it's just their style. Some girls, they have a certain style, right? So
No. When I say effort, I mean when I say effort, of course it's subjective. It's going to be based on the individual themselves. But if you see someone who just doesn't wear makeup, and then but they at least dress well. When they go out with you, they go in sweats. Like you genuinely see a downturn.
that can mean either they're already very comfortable with you, or that I'm pretty sure that means that they're just not if they're not putting the effort to look well, it could mean that they're just not interested in the whole.
Presentation is everything.
Presentation doesn't matter. Humans, we base everything off of first appearances until we start talking to them, in which our appearances change, but that's over a long time.
Speaking of presentation, another thing is towards the eyes. In other words, if the pupils dilate, it's so that they actually do like you. Memo. Is this a true statement, or is this old?
This is a common tidbit that we tend to hear. I don't know the exact source behind this, But if I had to bet, I would be willing to say that it doesn't make sense because the pupils, they dilate to let in more light whenever there's something that draws their attention. But you also have to consider that it could invoke an emotional response too. I don't know if you ever noticed, if you ever go to a restaurant that's typically romantic theme, you know how the lights are kind of turned down low? That's to cause the pupils to dilate. And that in turn might generate an emotional response of greater intimacy with another person.
So you can emotionally manipulate someone to liking you if you just constantly take them to like very dark rooms.
Well,
you know, be like, hey,
you don't
wanna
want
come
to. You don't
back
want to
at
have
me?
a completely. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. You don't want to do that. This is when we get into the fine line between psychology and manipulation. Psychology can be used for manipulation. Should it be? Probably not. Have people done it? They will always do it. So it's important to pick up on these things.
All right. Last points are going to be along the lines of body language. In other words, if they're very comfortable around you, they'll constantly show. They'll be more open to showing their quirky side. In other words, they have a little awkwardness. Like they'll be more willing to show it off. Another thing is that they're also visibly shy or nervous. In other words, because they feel the pressure of trying to make a good impression, they constantly, they're very restrained.
Huh.
So it's
Actually-
gonna.
I actually have a story. So whenever you're comfortable with the person, you're more likely to be yourself, right? So when I went on a first date with a person that I knew liked me, I was not hiding who I was. So you don't tend to filter yourself. And the evidence, there's been some studies run, and they found that when you are comfortable and you know that you have a great chance, you're more likely to be more bold with them, right? But if you are on the fence, you're more likely to be a bit more conservative in your personality. So it just really depends on the factors of how confident you are that they like you and how confident you are in yourself.
The next one is talking about personal details in their life. If they are more willing to release that kind of information, then it's a good indicator that they are attracted towards you. Now,
Yeah, so I was just going to add to that. So that falls under a flirting style made by Hall et al. It's called the sincere flirting style. And whenever they're disclosing themselves more, it tends to mean that they're not just interested in you in sexually, they actually want to pursue a long-term relationship with you.
oh wow. So, personal details. I've always curious about this one is timing. When is it the right time to actually say these kind of things? Do you just drop a bomb on them and be like, my dog just died yesterday? And,
It depends on how close you are. For instance, if you're already good friends before you start dating, then that'd probably be okay. However, it's the first date. You met him off of Tinder. And you say, yeah, my parents are getting divorced. It's cool. I'm crying every night. Of course not.
For that, it's common sense.
Yeah,
Common
you just gotta
sense.
you gotta play it by ear. This isn't so much science as it is like social etiquette. So
Yeah.
all right. And finally, the last point made by the who are these people anyways? The hack spirit. There we go.
The hack frauds? They're hack frauds.
well, that's what we're talking about, the science.
The most vague, website for trying to indicate whether or not they're attracted to you. Regardless, they talk about conversations. In other words, that the conversation between the two of you are it's very minimalistic. You don't have to bother saying too much or force anything too much. It's just very casual, and it flows very smoothly.
By minimalist, you mean like carrying on conversations like with
Yeah,
just one word? So
there's
like
not a lot of
I say
effort.
burrito. Burrito.
I think he means in the sense that it's not forced, right?
It could also, I mean, when you think about it, minimalistic does make sense. If you're very close, then having a high context language between the two of you should be eventual. In other words, when you're in the relationship, a high context and low context. Low context is what we have here in America. In other words, you need to emphasize every word. You need to make a full sentence. It's like a recipe book. You read everything. It's half a cup of milk, half a cup of a quarter of butter, a teaspoon of salt. It's very, very precise instructions. But in a high context society, it's like an Italian cookbook. In other words, you read it and it tells you, just put a pinch of this, put until your heart desires. So in other words, so it does make sense that if you say burrito, and I do know you well enough, then I would know exactly what you mean by that.
I think it falls under the curve of relationships. So you know how whenever you're first in love, you have that whole honeymoon phase, and then you taper off, and you don't feel erotic love, but you start feeling like paternal love. You feel that you would do anything for them. Like the three types of love is like eros, philia, and agape, the three types of love. So I think it follows that.
Yeah.
At first, you're gonna have kind of awkward conversations if one of you is awkward, but as you get more comfortable, the conversation is gonna escalate. Like you're gonna get more details, you're gonna have more thorough conversation. But then once you say you get married, that kind of drops off because now you're so familiar with each other that you don't need to have these at length conversations, right? Instead, you kind of just understand each other intuitively because you've just been with them so long. So I think at first, if there's hesitation in the conversation, you could chalk it up to awkwardness. However, you can tell when they're not making the effort if they're just giving you one word answers and they're not asking a lot of questions in return.
Ooh.
Something you want to chime in, Abraham?
No, that just reminds me of a bunch of texts that I used to get in high school as a
Just
freshman.
bad memories.
Just
That's
like,
why I have a rule: always be open-minded to leaving a bad relationship, Abraham. Okay, so you got to keep in mind.
All right, in that case, what if now you say that it could just be up to awkwardness? Now we all of us do know a very bad, let's say, texter. That's the most common way of communicating nowadays. You don't really call somebody. So I'm just saying, if they're just a bad texter, would you indicate it as they're not interested? Would you really? Is that really reliable?
I think that comes up to personality, like your own. For instance, me personally, if they're a bad texter, I don't think it's going to work out because I need communication. However, other people that are okay with not talking for a while, it's going to be okay for them. Me personally, no, if they're bad texters, I don't think it's a really good sign. What about you, Abraham?
I just want to be able to talk with them in person more rather than texts.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my main thing.
Yeah,
when it
yeah,
comes
no, I
to
get you.
text, because like I want to be a short texter. Like I want to get the main points out there to them,
Like burrito.
like burrito, taco.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's so yeah, because then eventually I'll start getting a headache from texts. It's like, oh, I gotta start thinking about it. But I only get headaches when I don't really like them. That's a sign right there. It's like
kind of because it's like a forced conversation.
yeah, I should be I should be like, holy moly, I might get a text from this person.
Yeah.
If you like them, you're gonna be like, hey, I can't wait to see what they say.
Exactly.
Moving back to the idea of attraction, though, according to Science of People, .com, they make one extra point besides the original 5 I mentioned before, which is mirroring, barriers, and extras. The last one is emotional attentiveness. In other words, emotional attentiveness is when they have a high level of empathy when it comes to issues like you. In other words, if you say that some tragedy struck you or befell you, then in that case, they'll be very empathetic towards you and they try to constantly help you. Memo, what do you think about this? Do you think this would be a great indicator of whether or not they're attracted towards you?
Scientifically speaking, I don't have data. But personally speaking, I would say so. I know a girl that was very supportive and I knew she liked me. Well, I knew that later. I didn't know that then. And usually when they're very supportive, it's usually because they're interested in you. This falls back to the whole sincere flirting style. They want to create an emotional bond with you. And in helping you, they feel like that bond is being formed.
The only issue I have with this is, once again, it could also be chalked up to personality.
That
Now,
is
if
true.
someone is just a very empathetic individual, then of course they're going to be empathetic towards you.
Mhm.
But once again, these tips are very vague and they're they're not exactly a blueprint because there's no blueprint to anything.
Yeah, me personally, I wouldn't take them being empathetic as they like me. I would just take it that they're good people.
Yeah, they're just being human.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it as they like me.
In that case, Abraham, did you actually learn anything new? That's something you didn't know from before, or did you get any new information and you might be able to use this information in the future?
The spectrum, walking the line. I want to say that I learned more about that.
Fantastic. As long as you learned something, then the entire point of this is getting fulfilled. We just want to educate people on, once again, some of the pop psych references. For example, body language and little, maybe debunk a few myths based on these ideas. We'll be covering different topics. Memo here will be actually supporting it with real science and not just the bullshit articles I'm reading.
Also, I want to say I also learned another new thing, something to maybe watch out for. The smiling thing, the smiling muscles. I don't know. I think you may want to talk about that again because we tried recording that last time.
Yeah. So basically, the smile that humans have, when it's an authentic smile, it's called a Duchenne smile. It activates certain muscles in the face that are autonomous. We don't have any control over it. And it causes the eyes to squint a bit and to get a bit of wrinkle around the side of the eyes. And this is very, very, very hard to fake. When somebody has a Duchenne smile, they are legitimately amused and they are enjoying the situation that they're in. And that's usually a good sign that the person around you is happy. That doesn't mean that they like you, but it just means that they're happy. Well, that's everything. Thank you for joining the Gapcast. My name is Guillermo with my co-host Peter and Abraham. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.